In this video, we're going to talk about 4 non-technical skills that will help you stand out as a software developer. So I started developing software more than 10 years ago, or at least working as a professional developer. And, my technical skills were not that good to begin with. And I was working with some very senior developers, and I could obviously see that gap. And I was really working hard to close that gap. But, as time went by and I saw how software is built and the process behind how software is always, meeting business needs and customer needs in addition to, building software and having all those things kind of work together, I started to realize that like the technical skills are only one aspect of the job and the non-technical skills are kind of important. So a lot of times you hear people like, okay, communication is important, for example. Those are the biggest things with your soft skills is know how to communicate, and that's correct. But what I want to talk about is more concrete things that can make you stand out. And that's what this video is about. So let's start with the very first one, demoing your code. This is something that a lot of companies do. They might make this kind of like one of the rituals of your sprint, having it at different kind of increments, but you'll see somebody demo what they're working on at some point if you're working in a tech company. And I've seen this at kind of small and large. How does this demo look like? Usually, you're on a call or maybe in person, and you kind of go through kind of like one aspect of your code. Either you show a video or you show yourself using it. And this might be in production or it might be just on your laptop, but it's you're showing something new that's being built or something that you fixed. So this involves you, presenting to a bunch of people. It could be a very small crowd, could be a bigger crowd, and you're essentially showing them how it works, what this feature is for, maybe what you struggled with a little bit, and maybe answer some questions about how it works. So what I've seen over the years is that the developers that constantly demo their code are always getting noticed, and their communication skills are getting better, and they're showing off their work and being proud of what they worked on and showing off their team's work. And the ones that do it more consistently and don't shy away from it are kind of usually looked at as a more technical leader eventually. And when that tech lead role, that senior developer role comes in, that's always put into account, is that you're not afraid to show what you've worked on. And knowing that in that situation you might get asked uncomfortable questions, you're still able to kind of answer them confidently or have somebody in your team that you can refer to that can answer them confidently. So even if it's something very small that you worked on, I'd always recommend demoing some part of your code. So you can start off again very small, and eventually this could lead you to being a speaker and going to a conference and things like that. And that's how I started. I always like to demo my code and show something that I'm working on. And eventually, my first tech talk that I did was essentially just a longer demo of some problem that we had. So that's something that I think that if you're not doing as much or your company isn't doing, maybe bring it up that we should demo what we're working on a bit more. Sometimes it could be very serious demos that you're showing to customers, or there can be something where it's not that like big of a deal if there's some issues with it. One thing that I recommend with demos, and I actually made a video about this, is be well prepared. Everything that can go wrong usually does go wrong with demos. So I'll link the video on that if you want to see more about demoing your code. So that's about the first thing, good non-technical skill. The second one is project management. So I don't mean product management, but project management, So when you're usually working in a team, there's a bunch of things that you need to do. Everybody has a part that they need to do, and usually the sum of all these parts ends up, building a product. So breaking down the tasks into tasks that are actually, that make sense and are manageable, and that are, you're able to complete in a specific amount of time is going to be very important. A lot of times as engineers, we focus on only what we're working on and say, I'm going to do what I'm working on and that's it. Don't worry about anybody else. And sometimes you do need to do that, but I highly recommend that sometimes when these planning meetings are happening, that you're keeping a close eye on things and seeing that, okay, well, we want to ship something by this date, but we're working on something that's going to take way longer. And maybe raise the alarms on the team and say, I don't think this is going to work unless maybe we have somebody help. I don't think this is going to work unless we take something out. And this is kind of how project management works a lot of times is you see something that needs to get done, the right amount of people that need to do it, and everybody has a particular set of responsibilities, and something might fall behind. So you might have somebody else take a look at it, or you just do it later. But some things you can't leave behind, and some things need to get done, and that's where the focus should be. So I'm saying is that you don't need to be a project manager, but you need to be aware of these things, because eventually, when I became an engineering manager, these things were kind of more in my realm of responsibility, and it made it a lot easier. And even when I was just developing as a senior dev, I would notice that, like, okay, well, there's a back end task that needs to be done before we do this front end task. So I kind of raise that alarm and say, somebody needs to look into that before we do this, or we need to do it at the same time. And eventually, when I went back to being a developer after management, I always keep that in mind, and I always help the team by keeping track of these things and helping out the manager just realize that, like, okay, this might not make it on time. So basic project management skills. You don't need to take a course or anything like that. Just to be kind of more aware about what you're doing. And ultimately, we're all working on a project at any given time. We might call it a sprint or agile, but really they are a collection of projects that we're working on. So that's the second one. Let's talk about the third one. One thing that can make you really stand out is being really deep into the context, and the context of the business domain. So you might be working on, I worked in the restaurant industry. I've worked in e-commerce. I've made specific e-commerce apps. And even in the e-commerce industry, I've worked at different parts like analytics, automations, firing events, insights, stuff like that all expose a different part of a problem for a user, something that they're looking to get solved. And the more you learn about it, the easier your life becomes as a developer. And it also gives you a lot of insight into an industry. So for example, if you're building e-commerce sites with a shopping cart and stuff like that, for a specific industry, it might be different than another industry, right? Like if you're just selling stuff that is wholesale, like in boxes, it's very different than if you're selling like perishable goods, where prices might change every single week, right? Like produce and meats, and selling things by the pound, or selling like one thing versus selling like a case of 24. And what happens if something is wrong? How do you refund? All these things are very specific to a business domain. And the more you learn about that business domain, the better. I had the opportunity to work at startups where I can hear these conversations constantly happening around me, and I was consulted about them, and it made me know more about the business, and it made me a better developer because it made me think about solving that problem through code, right? And not just code itself. Because if you just focus on the code and not the business domain, you might be confused about how to solve the problem, or you might just solve it in the wrong way. Somebody might come and tell you, well, no. The customer is actually looking to solve this kind of problem. And usually your best friend on this situation is the product manager. Not the project, but the product manager is usually the person that is knows a lot about the business domain. So you can make this part of your kind of development, is to know more about the business domain that you're working on. And that's something I always try to do. And again, the product manager is usually the person that I look up to and ask a lot of questions to kind of know what the user is really looking for and how the industry I'm in really works. So let's talk about the last one. And this one is very common here, but it's building a relationship, or building relationships with people in your company, right? So what does it mean to build a relationship? Well, usually what I do when I start in a new team is I try to meet everybody on the team. Even if it's virtual, just have a quick 30-minute chat, introduce myself, talk about what I'm working on, what they're working on, and just to kind of say hello. And I'm this person. Here's my face. And just kind of like make some kind of human interaction. And one thing I start to do as well is be very helpful on the team. Is something comes up, I'm always kind of like not being the person that's very negative, but I try to be more positive and volunteer and kind of help out where I can. And even if it's something I have to do a favor for, where it's not expected of me, I'll do it. And that helps, build a relationship, being positive and not, essentially just, the kind of 101 on building a relationship and a network, which is to just be a good person. So that's on the last one there. And I know some people can be very much, introverted, and everybody has a different style. I'm very much not like that. So there's definitely lots of ways that you can do this on a low-key level. You don't have to talk to the CEO. Some companies have like coffee chats where they like match random people every week. So that's something that has really helped me build relationships in the company that I'm in and network. Something where I meet people regularly. Maybe not everybody's receptive to this. Some people you can tell, they just don't want to interact as much. That's fine. But there's some people that do want to. Eventually, these relationships build up to something really nice over the years. Some people became my friends that I hang out with. If I have issues at work, I consult them. I ask them from time to time how they're doing, and all that all started up with like building that kind of relationship with people that I work with. So eventually, all these things added together, I think, will make you very much distinguished as a programmer, and people will definitely kind of like see you differently. So I hope that helps. And keep working on your technical skills. There's no kind of alternative to that. But if you have these together with your technical skills, I guarantee that you will be a standout developer.